There's a reason you found this video at this particular moment, Aries. As I was tuning into the energy surrounding the next phase of your journey, I couldn't shake the feeling that something inside of you is beginning to move again. Not in the same old way. Not like those long stretches where every day starts to blur together, and you feel stuck inside a version of yourself that no longer fits who you're becoming. Some of you are beginning to notice new doors opening, new opportunities, new directions. Paths you may have hesitated to walk toward before, but now something deeper inside you keeps pulling you closer. And what's interesting is, everything feels like it's starting to move again in a very different way. Lighter, clearer, more aligned. Almost like life has been quietly clearing space for a brand new chapter to unfold. So, if you've been feeling this shift too, I want you to leave this in the comments. Aries is ready for a new chapter. I genuinely want to see how many Aries out there can already feel this energy beginning to build. And now, let's step into today's reading together and see what the tarot cards may be trying to reveal about the next part of your journey. There's something very different happening inside the energy around Aries right now. It doesn't feel like some sudden explosive change overnight. It feels more like sitting alone in your car after a long day, watching the city lights slide across the window, and suddenly realizing you don't really belong to the old version of your life anymore. Some of you may not have been sleeping very deeply lately. Your mind keeps running. Your thoughts won't fully slow down. Even your phone vibrating in the middle of the night feels enough to pull you awake instantly. Not because something dramatic is happening right this second, but because something inside of you is beginning to wake up. And the moment the Ace of Wands card comes through here, that energy becomes impossible to ignore. This is the card of the first spark. Not the kind of fire that destroys everything around you, but the kind that reminds you how powerful you've always been underneath all the exhaustion. Some Aries have spent a long time trying to force themselves to stay small, trying to adapt to environments that no longer feel aligned. You stayed in places that drained you, held on to conversations that stopped carrying any real feeling, tried to act okay while deep down, you could feel yourself becoming more disconnected from who you really are. But here's the thing about Aries. You can stay quiet for a while, you can delay things for a while, but you can't completely put out the fire inside you forever. And that's exactly why the Knight of Wands card appears right after that. There's such a restless energy surrounding you right now. It feels like wanting to get up and leave where you are immediately. Wanting different air, wanting out of the old cycle, wanting to feel alive inside your own heart again. I keep seeing this image of an Aries sitting beside a window late at night, the city lights still glowing outside. The room so quiet you can hear your own breathing, and in that moment you start asking yourself, what if I really did start over? And honestly, that thought doesn't feel impulsive to me. It feels like it's coming from a very deep part of you, a part that's exhausted from shrinking itself just to fit into places that no longer feel meant for you anymore. Then the Chariot card appears, and this is where the energy begins to move again. Not in a rushed way, not in a prove something to the world kind of way. More like your inner world is finally trying to move in the same direction as the life you genuinely want for yourself. Some of you may have been thinking more seriously lately about changing jobs, changing environments, cutting ties with things that constantly drain your energy, or simply stopping the habit of postponing what your heart has been asking for all along. And what's interesting is, even if everything still feels unclear, you can already feel the movement beginning underneath it all. It's very similar to when the Fool card appears in a reading. The Fool card doesn't ask you to have every answer right now. It simply reminds you that sometimes a new chapter begins the moment you stop clinging to the version of yourself you've already outgrown. And honestly, I think a lot of Aries have been living in survival mode for far too long. Always staying strong, always handling everything, always being the one who keeps moving forward even while completely exhausted inside. But this energy feels different. It doesn't feel like just keep pushing. It feels more like an inner shift. Like you're slowly remembering who you were before the pressure, before the burnout, before the disappointments made you forget that version of yourself. And maybe that's the most important part of this entire phase. Not moving faster, not changing your whole life overnight, but the moment the fire inside you finally decides it doesn't want to stay silent anymore. And when that happens, the next choices Aries makes could begin changing far more than you realize. Because there are certain crossroads in life that look completely ordinary at first. A short conversation in the kitchen after midnight. A long drive just to quiet your mind for a few hours. A moment where you stare at your phone lighting up over and over again and suddenly realize you don't want to answer anyone anymore. but sometimes those small, quiet moments are exactly where life begins to change direction. And honestly, I think that's where Aries is standing right now. The Two of Wands card comes through with a very specific feeling. This no longer feels like impulsive energy trying to run away from everything immediately. It feels more like someone finally beginning to look beyond the place they've been standing in for too long. There's an awareness growing here, a realization that you can't keep building a new life using the same old patterns forever. Some Aries may have been feeling more distance lately between themselves and the people around them, not because anyone is necessarily wrong or right. The energy just connects the same way anymore. You start having conversations that somehow leave you feeling empty afterward. You walk through places that used to feel familiar, but no longer feel like home inside your spirit. And sometimes you're still smiling, still replying to messages, still showing up like everything is normal. While deep down, it feels like your soul's already standing somewhere else entirely. And usually, that's when the Judgment card begins to appear in a reading. I've always felt like this card carries a very quiet kind of energy. It doesn't explode the way the Tower card does. It's not as dramatic as people expect it to be. It feels more like someone sitting alone in a dark room, and for the first time in a very long time, finally becoming honest enough to hear their own inner voice clearly. Aries is used to moving quickly, but this time, the thing creating change inside you doesn't feel impulsive at all. It feels like exhaustion that's been building for too long. The exhaustion of forcing yourself to stay inside environments that slowly make you feel smaller. The exhaustion of constantly adapting to situations your heart no longer feels connected to. And maybe because of that, some of you have been thinking more seriously lately about leaving a job, leaving a social circle, leaving a version of life that constantly keeps your nervous system tense. Not because Aries wants to destroy everything, but because something inside you needs room to breathe again. And when the Wheel of Fortune card appears beside the Judgment card, it feels like the wheel of your life is beginning to turn in a different direction now. Not so fast that everything changes overnight, but enough for you to feel that you can't fully return to the old version of yourself anymore. New opportunities may begin appearing in unexpected ways, conversations that seem random at first, thoughts that no longer hold the same power over you, doors you never imagined yourself wanting to walk through before. And honestly, I don't think the hardest part for Aries right now is starting over. I think the hardest part is accepting that the new version of you may want a completely different kind of life than before. A quieter life, a more honest one, a life with less proving, less constant running. And that's when the Emperor card comes through here. A lot of people think this card is only about power or control. But sometimes, the most evolved version of the Emperor card is simply someone who finally knows what they want to build for their own life. Not to impress the world, not to win against anyone else, but so that every time they come home at the end of the day, they no longer feel disconnected from themselves anymore. And I think Aries may be moving closer to that feeling now. Even though there are still a lot of unanswered spaces in front of you, deep down, I think you can already feel that something important inside you is changing. It feels like the moment right before a heavy rain finally begins. The city is still quiet, but the air already feels different. And maybe Aries is beginning to feel that shift inside themselves now too. Not the kind of transformation other people would immediately notice. Not some dramatic movie-style reinvention. More like quiet movement happening underneath the surface. You start responding differently to the things that used to hurt you. You find yourself staying silent during arguments you once would have rushed into immediately. You grow tired of constantly trying to prove your worth to people who never truly understood you in the first place. And honestly, that kind of change usually only happens when someone has become exhausted from living as a version of themselves that no longer feels real anymore. And when the Death card appears here, I don't experience it as frightening ending energy at all. It actually feels lighter to me, like someone finally taking off a coat they've worn for far too long. A coat that may have helped them survive certain chapters of life, but has now become too heavy, too tight to keep carrying forward. I think a lot of Aries have been carrying things lately that were never truly theirs to hold anymore. Old expectations, the pressure to always stay strong, roles and identities that slowly made you forget what it even feels like to live honestly as yourself. There are nights where you lie still in a dark room, your phone lighting up and fading over and over beside you. And the thing exhausting you isn't really work or other people. It's the feeling that you've been holding yourself together for too long. And the powerful thing about the Death card is that it often appears when the soul no longer wants to continue living the old way. Not because Aries is becoming weaker, but because you're growing in a different way now. A quieter way, a deeper way, a more honest way. Then the Tower card comes through right beside it. And I know a lot of people fear this card. But sometimes the Tower card isn't here to destroy your life. Sometimes it simply collapses the things that were no longer stable to begin with. An old belief. A relationship held together mostly by habit. A version of Aries that keeps pretending everything is okay. Some of you may be realizing lately that certain things you fought so hard to hold on to were actually the very things draining you the most. And moments like that are usually very quiet. Nobody claps. There's no dramatic ending scene. Just an ordinary night, sitting alone in your car in a parking lot, listening to rain tap softly against the windshield, and realizing for the first time that you don't want to go back to the old version of yourself anymore. And honestly, I think that's where the real strength of Aries begins to appear. Not loud strength. Not the kind that needs to defeat somebody else. More like the energy of the Strength card. This card always makes me think of someone who has lived through enough pain to finally understand that calmness can be a form of power too. You no longer want to react to everything instantly. You no longer want to waste your energy on battles that don't bring you any closer to peace. Something inside Aries is slowly stabilizing now, almost like after living in survival mode for such a long time. Your body is finally learning how to breathe slowly again. And then the King of Wands card appears. This isn't the impulsive fire of the Knight of Wands card anymore. This is a more mature fire. An Aries who knows what they want, knows what deserves their energy, knows when it's time to move forward and when it's time to let go. And honestly, I think this version of Aries was built through a lot of silent nights nobody else ever saw. Through the moments where you had to pull yourself out of despair alone. Through the moments where you learned how to stay strong without becoming emotionally hardened. And maybe that's why this transformation no longer feels like running away from the past. It feels more like returning to yourself. Like after so many emotional cycles and inner battles, Aries is finally beginning to see the person they truly want to become. And the strange thing is, when someone truly begins changing from the inside out, the energy around them starts changing too. And honestly, I think that's why cards like the Three of Pentacles card and the Two of Cups card are showing up so strongly during this phase for Aries. This no longer feels like the image of an Aries trying to carry everything alone anymore. It feels more like, after such a long season of surviving, healing, and pulling yourself back up piece by piece, you're beginning to enter a chapter where new connections can arrive more naturally. Not loudly, not through forcing anything, not through trying to impress people. Just that feeling of meeting someone or stepping into a space where for the first time in a very long time, you don't feel like you have to shrink yourself just to be accepted. I keep seeing this image of an Aries sitting inside a quiet cafe late in the afternoon. Warm yellow light reflecting against the windows. Cars moving slowly through soft rain outside. And in a very ordinary moment like that, you begin feeling like life may still have new possibilities waiting for you after all. Maybe it's a conversation, a collaboration offer, someone who makes you feel genuinely heard. Or maybe it's simply the feeling that you're no longer as isolated as you once were. The Three of Pentacles card always makes me think about building something meaningful alongside other people. Not dependency, not losing yourself, but the kind of connection where everyone brings the best parts of themselves together to create something larger than any one person could create alone. And I think Aries is slowly learning how to receive that kind of connection again. Because there's a truth many Aries rarely say out loud. Even the strongest people eventually become exhausted from fighting alone for too long. Some of you may have gotten used to handling everything by yourself, pulling yourself through hard days alone, keeping yourself steady even when your inner world felt completely chaotic. But this energy feels different now. It feels like life is slowly bringing people towards you who make you feel lighter just by being around them. You don't feel like you have to stay guarded all the time. You don't feel constantly prepared for another battle. And then the Two of Cups card appears with such soft energy around it. This doesn't only feel romantic to me. It feels like genuine human connection. Feeling understood without needing to over-explain yourself. Feeling seen as your real self without having to perform perfection all the time. And honestly, I think part of Aries has always deeply longed for that kind of connection. You've just spent so long protecting yourself that sometimes you forget you deserve gentleness too. And maybe because you've already lived through enough disappointment, Aries is no longer searching for connections that only look exciting on the surface. Now you notice the peace someone brings into your life, the sense of safety you feel around certain people, the conversations that make your breathing slow down instead of speed up. When the Knight of Cups card appears here, it feels like the heart of Aries is softening again in a very mature way. Not weakness, not losing your strength, just finally reaching a place where you no longer want to live like you're constantly fighting against the world anymore. And with these connections, there may also come new opportunities, new projects, new invitations, new doors opening that slowly encourage Aries to step a little further beyond the old version of life they've been living in. But what I love most about this energy is that it no longer feels like running away from the past. It feels more like Aries is slowly walking toward a life that feels more like home. Then the Six of Wands card appears almost like a distant light at the end of the road. Not some giant spotlight, not victory for the sake of proving something to everyone else. More like the quiet feeling of finally realizing you may actually be moving in the right direction now. And sometimes, that feeling alone is enough to help a person keep going. I think Aries has been moving through a very long season where everything felt tied to survival, working just to avoid falling behind, trying so hard not to disappoint anyone, continuing to push forward even when your energy had already been running low for a long time. But this energy feels different now. It no longer feels you're simply trying to make it through each day anymore. It feels more like the moment someone finally begins asking themselves, what would my life actually look like if I rebuilt it from the ground up? And the moment the Ace of Pentacles card appears here, I can't help but feel like a new door is slowly beginning to open for Aries, not in some flashy overnight way. Not the kind of opportunity that suddenly changes everything instantly. It feels more like you're beginning to see a path that could bring real stability into your life over time. Maybe it's a new job, an idea you once abandoned, a project that makes you feel motivated again. Or maybe it's simply the feeling that you finally want to invest your energy seriously into your own future for once. I keep seeing this image of an Aries sitting alone in the kitchen very late at night, a cup of coffee gone cold beside them, city lights reflecting against rain-soaked streets outside the window, and in that quiet moment, you begin thinking about your life differently than before. Not just, how do I survive this? But instead, how do I actually build a life that feels good to live in? And honestly, that's the deeper energy behind the Ace of Pentacles card. This card isn't only about money, it's about value. It's about Aries beginning to understand that your time, your energy, and your heart deserve to be poured into things that can grow with you, instead of things that continue draining you empty. Then the Chariot card returns once again. And this makes me feel like Aries is entering a period with very real momentum behind it now. No more standing still for too long. No more endlessly thinking and postponing. It feels like after everything that's happened inside you, some part of you is finally ready to take the wheel of your life back again. Some Aries may have been thinking lately about changing work environments, learning something new, building a path that actually belongs to them instead of continuing down roads that slowly wear them down. And what I really love about this energy is that it no longer feels driven by panic. It feels more mature now. Like someone finally realizing they don't have to move at full speed just to prove their worth to anybody anymore. You simply need to move in the direction that feels true for you. Then the Sun card appears like this warm light breaking through after a long stretch of emotional pressure. And honestly, I don't experience this as loud success energy. It's not massive spotlight energy. It's not about recognition from the whole world. It feels more like waking up in the morning and realizing your heart doesn't feel as heavy as it used to. Like hope slowly returning to your life again in a very human way. There may be opportunities that allow Aries to feel more seen. Projects that rebuild your confidence in your own abilities. Or small moments that quietly remind you you're beginning to move beyond the version of yourself that constantly doubted everything you did. And when the King of Pentacles card appears at the end of this reading, I see the image of an Aries becoming far more emotionally grounded inside themselves, no longer reacting purely from temporary emotions, no longer wasting energy on things that bring no real value into your life. Instead, this feels like someone learning how to build a foundation for their life in a much more mature way, slowly, quietly, but far more solid than before. And honestly, I think one of the most beautiful things about this phase is that Aries is no longer chasing success simply to escape feelings of inner lack. You're beginning to want a life that actually feels peaceful when you return home to it at the end of the day. Like a single light still glowing inside an apartment in the middle of the city after midnight. Not overly bright, not trying to impress anyone, just warm enough for someone to realize they may finally be finding a place that truly feels like home inside themselves. And maybe that's what this entire journey has really been trying to bring Aries back to all along. Not becoming a more perfect person, not becoming stronger than everyone else, but returning to the truest version of yourself. After spending so many years carrying pressure, expectations, and silent inner battles nobody else could fully see. And when the judgment card appears one final time in this reading, it doesn't feel like judgment to me at all. It feels more like a calling. A very quiet calling, but deep enough that you can no longer pretend you don't hear it anymore. Some Aries may have spent far too much time doubting themselves, doubting their emotions, doubting their intuition, even doubting things their heart has known for a very long time already. But there are certain seasons in life where everything begins changing simply because someone finally becomes honest with themselves. And honestly, I think Aries is standing very close to that kind of energy now. Not the kind of transformation that immediately grabs the world's attention. More like the moment you stop turning away from yourself anymore. And sometimes, that can be more powerful than any dramatic turning point. I keep seeing this image of an Aries walking slowly through the city late at night. The streets quieter now, rain softening against the rooftops, your phone resting silently in your pocket. And for the first time in a long time, you no longer feel the need to answer everything immediately. It's almost like after all the chaos, you're learning how to listen to your own breathing again. Then the Fool card appears with such light energy around it. A lot of people think the Fool card is only about starting over from zero. But to me, this card has always felt more connected to courage. The courage to keep moving forward without having every answer yet. The courage to try living differently. The courage to believe there may still be unopened chapters waiting somewhere ahead of you. And maybe that's what Aries is learning right now. Not how to control the entire future. Not how to force everything to become perfect before taking the first step. But how to allow yourself to continue forward with a lighter heart than before. Then the Ace of Wands card appears once again, like this quiet flame that's been burning underneath the entire journey all along. But this time, the energy feels different. It's no longer the fire of impulsiveness or the need to run as fast as possible just to escape something. It feels like the fire of someone finally beginning to live closer to their own soul again. An Aries who no longer wants to keep shrinking themselves just to fit into spaces that make them feel emotionally suffocated. An Aries who no longer wants to spend their entire life pleasing everyone else while slowly exhausting themselves inside. And honestly, there's something very beautiful about the maturity happening here. You're beginning to realize that sometimes the strongest thing a person can do isn't continuing to endure more pain. Sometimes it's choosing a life that feels more honest to who they truly are. And then the Star card appears at the end of the reading like a quiet sky after a long storm. Not overly bright, not dramatic, just the feeling of hope slowly returning in a gentler way. Like opening a window right before sunrise, the city's still completely quiet. Cold air brushing against your skin. And for the first time in a very long while, your heart no longer feels as heavy as it once did. And honestly, I don't think this journey came here to turn Aries into someone completely different. If anything, it may simply be guiding you back toward the part of yourself that was always strong, alive, and free underneath all the years of trying so hard just to survive adulthood. And maybe this new chapter doesn't begin with one massive life-changing moment after all. Maybe it begins the moment Aries finally decides they're no longer going back to the old version of themselves anymore.